Alright, thanks for tuning in. I am going to be debarking, stripping a piece of dogwood. And if you've watched any of my videos, you may have seen a couple of them where I've got dogwood. This is not a forgiving wood. Some woods like walnut and cedar and a couple others, you can just take the tree, cut it down in sections, and you can honestly probably dry it in your garage or your shop completely uncontrolled, and they'll keep their form pretty well, and they may develop some cracks on the outside of the wood, the outside of the log, but typically you still get a lot of useful wood. For one thing, dogwood doesn't grow very large. This piece of dogwood here is about 40 years old, 45 years old, and at its widest point is only about 4 inches. So this tree, I was counting the rings earlier, is somewhere between 40 and 45 years old and is still only about 4 inches in diameter. There are some oak trees that I planted as a kid that are about 1.5 feet in diameter, so about as big as a little bit bigger actually than a 5-gallon bucket compared to this little 4-inch baby here. There are a lot of benefits to working with dogwood. It carves really nicely. It's got extremely tight grain, and it is one of the hardest woods in the U.S. It's definitely one of the toughest woods that you can get in the U.S. It's flexible but extremely shock resistant and strong. So, a little history on dogwood. I do like this stuff. I don't cut down living trees. I try to find trees that get blown down in storms or trees that have been laying out in the woods for a couple of years. They develop color as they age. So if you cut down a fresh tree, and this one's not going to have really good color because it fell pretty recently, but if you cut down a fresh dogwood tree or find a piece of brand new fresh dogwood that someone's cut down, it's not going to have very good color typically. It'll be a real paley white color and won't be a, I don't know if you can tell the color of this, it won't be a pink looking wood like this. Well, I like the sound of that. It's got a real nice ring to it. But anyway, when you cut down a fresh dogwood tree, it's not going to have very good color to it, so you really do have to find one that's been laying down for typically at least a couple of years, a few years or so. And the problem with that is that insects get into this wood really, really quickly. This has actually still got some green bark on it, and the bark is not falling off, so this one hasn't been dead probably more than I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 months that it's been dead and laying on the ground from a storm that came through. And even in that short period of time, this thing is pretty well infested on the bark, at least, with a variety of wood-boring beetle larvae. And if you leave these things alone unchecked, here's an example of what they'll do. See if I can get this where you all can see it. I can't really see what you can see. Not sure if it's going to focus or not. Well, of course she's not going to focus. We'll try this again. There we go. You can kind of see where they've gone underneath the bark, and they'll typically eat the bark first. When they get large enough, they'll make these holes down into the wood, and they just go all through it. They don't go in any particular pattern. They just really decimate your wood. This one I partially debarked it, but obviously didn't get all the bark off. You can still see there's quite a little bit of small bark on here, which was enough to sustain those little boogers until they had a chance to really destroy this wood. And now that I say that, I may have actually pulled this bark off after this had dried out, come to think of it. But anyway, that's why you need to get as much of the bark off as possible, especially with dogwood, if you're going to let this thing dry as a slab and not try to cut it while it's green. And the biggest problem with cutting dogwood when it's green is it's going to twist and bow and cup and warp, and anything else you can think of that wood does when it dries, dogwood is probably the worst. So I typically debark it, cut it down to size, and then put it in PVC pipes or put it inside of totes, cover it with sawdust, and let it sit for a few years. And it'll take a few years for it to dry out that way, but it'll typically dry without any substantial cracking. This one has just the tiniest bit of cracking in the end grain. You can kind of see it there. I also waxed the ends. That one broke a little bit worse than the other end. But wax your ends, cover them up, wrap them in something that'll slow the moisture from coming out of them. And that's how I usually put mine in totes, and then pour sawdust in over the top of them and just let them sit submerged in that sawdust for a couple of years. and it'll dry out enough that you can mill it while it's dry, even though it's more difficult. At least the boards don't tend to fight you too much. They don't warp and twist and bend and bow and cup and crown and whatever else you can think of. They stay relatively straight when you mill them if you dry them first. So first step, kind of rambling on there, is a good sharp draw knife. And this is just a cheap one off Amazon. Nothing too fancy. I will say it holds an edge pretty well. And I think I only paid neighborhood of $20 for this thing. It didn't come with a sheath or anything. But get your bark stripped down. Try to get all the way down to fresh wood, so you don't leave any larvae in there. Focus you a little bit better there. Let's see here. There you go. Almost had it in frame. But get her stripped. Spend the time on it. Otherwise, all the time you did spend will be completely wasted. And then you pull this thing out of the bucket and it's just turned to sawdust with those wood boring beetles. Okay. Once you've pretty well stripped it end to end, another product, this Anchor Seal 2, is my favorite end grain sealer. See if I can get you in focus there. There we go. So Anchor Seal 2, you just take it, I take a little chip paintbrush, paint it pretty thick on the ends of the wood, and that'll keep the ends from splitting. Cover these things up in some sawdust to control the drying, or put them in a PVC pipe with a couple of small holes to let humidity out. But really, you want to dry this as slowly as you can possibly stand to dry it. The slower you dry it, the better the wood will turn out at the end. So there we go. Video ran a little bit longer than I was anticipating. A lot more information I was meant to put in there for you. But if this was at all helpful, we would certainly appreciate a like and subscribe. Share it with a friend if you think it'll help them. And dogwood's a fun wood to work with. There are a lot of benefits to this wood that just other woods don't have. It's extremely strong, flexible, hard, and tough. And it's pretty. It really is pretty. Even if you do have all these little beetles trying to destroy your good time, there's still a lot of good wood in there. It makes for excellent wooden mallets, amongst other things. All right, if you liked it, please like the video for us. We'd appreciate that. That helps us get these out to other people. And share it with a friend. Comment below if you all have any other suggestions on how to debark these things. This draw knife is the best I've come up with so far. And I've been doing this for a few years. These trees are just so small you can't really use many of the mechanical debarkers because they tend to destroy too much of this wood. I have used pressure washers to clean off the bark when the bark was already a little bit loose, but for whatever reason, dogwood bark really likes to hold on to the wood. So I haven't had particularly good luck with my pressure washer to get this stuff to come off of dogwood. Works with other woods, doesn't seem to do it for dogwood. All right, comment below if you have any ideas for me. We'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you.